In the vast emptiness of space, an alien ship cruised silently through the stars. The ship belonged to a species known as the Zilothians, intelligent beings with advanced technology. They had traveled across the galaxy for centuries, conquering weaker species and claiming planets as their own. To them, the galaxy was theirs to control. No species had ever been able to resist them. But that was about to change. The Zilothians had been on a mission to find new worlds to invade. They had scouted many planets, seen countless civilizations, and wiped out all those who dared to fight back. But today they discovered something unexpected. A strange object appeared on their radar, a massive dark shape moving through space at a steady pace. It didn't match any known species ships. The Zilothians had never seen anything like it. The ship was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It was large, dark, and intimidating. Its design was jagged, sharp, perfect for battle. It looked like something built for war, not exploration. The Zilothians felt a strange unease as they observed it from a distance. Could it be another alien, species they hadn't encountered yet? Or was it something more dangerous? The Zilothian captain, Zarvox, ordered the ship to move closer. His species was fearless, conquerors of the stars. But as they drew near, the captain couldn't shake the strange feeling in his chest. He felt a deep instinct telling him something was wrong. His instincts had always been sharp, and they had never failed him before. "What is it?" Zarvox asked, his voice low and filled with suspicion. "We are close enough to scan, Captain," one of the crew members reported, his voice shaking slightly. Zarvox nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Initiate the scan. I want to know everything about this ship." The crew quickly activated the ship's advanced scanning systems. The massive alien warship's sensors reached out to touch the unknown vessel. What they found in those first moments shocked them. The alien warship was different. Its technology was more advanced than anything the Zilothians had ever encountered. The Zilothian ship's instruments began to flicker, unable to fully comprehend the ship's structure. Its energy output was far beyond anything they had seen before. But what truly caught their attention were the massive weapon systems on the human ship. The Zilothians had seen weapons before. They had seen planets destroyed with ease, fleets wiped out in seconds. But these weapons were different. There was a power here, an energy that made the Zilothians' scanners buzz and hum with alarm. It was as though the ship itself was built, for one purpose, to destroy anything that stood in its way. Captain Zarvox stood in the command center, staring at the screen with a growing sense of dread. His species had never encountered a weapon this powerful, and certainly not one on a ship of this size. The Zilothians were a race built for conquest, and yet, here was something that made even them pause. What kind of species would build something like this? Zarvox murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had never seen their captain look worried before, but now they could see it in his eyes. The captain was afraid. As the scan continued, more shocking details emerged. The ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a war machine designed for battle in every aspect. The Zilothians had never seen such efficient use of energy or such deadly firepower. It was clear that this warship had been built by a species that valued strength and combat above all else. But what truly terrified the Zilothians wasn't just the ship. It was the beings inside it, the humans. The Zilothians learned that humans were the ones who had built this warship. The species was young, compared to the Zilothians, yet their ability to adapt, fight, and survive was unmatched. The scan revealed something more terrifying. Humanity had fought wars across their planet, fought against each other, and yet they had never been completely destroyed. They were resilient. They survived. They learned. And that made them unpredictable. Zarvox's heart began to race as he absorbed the information. He had never encountered a species so determined, so difficult to conquer. Every other race they had encountered had fallen to the might of the Zilothians. But humans were different. "Captain, the human warship systems are starting to activate," a crew member called out, his voice filled with alarm. Zarvox looked at the screen. The human ship's weapons were powering up, as if it were preparing for something. The Zilothians had been caught off guard, but now they realized that the human warship was not just a defense, it was a challenge the Zilothians were not prepared for. Captain Zarvox knew in that moment that they had made a mistake. They had underestimated the humans, and that mistake might cost them dearly. The scan was complete, the warship was fully analyzed. But Zarvox couldn't shake the feeling that they had uncovered something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. He stared at the screen, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. For the first time in his life, he wondered if the Zilothians had finally met their match. "Prepare for all possibilities," Zarvox said, his voice grim. This is not what we expected." And with that, the alien ship drifted further, into the unknown, knowing that the true test of their strength was just beginning. The Zilothians were not a species to back down easily, but there was something in the air now that unsettled them all. The scan was complete, and with it came the chilling realization that the humans were far more dangerous than they'd imagined. Captain Zarvox stood at the center of the command room, his sharp eyes scanning the data that had just been collected. The warship they had encountered wasn't like anything they had ever seen before. It wasn't just a ship. It was a fortress, one that seemed to pulse with an energy that made the Zilothians' advanced systems tremble. The sensors hummed nervously, reflecting the unease that had begun to spread among the crew. "We have never encountered a species with such advanced technology," one of the crew members whispered, his voice betraying the fear he was trying to suppress. Zarvox clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had always trusted his instincts, but now, those instincts were telling him that the humans, this strange young species, held a power that could shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. They had been studying the warship's power grid for minutes now, and the readings were unlike anything the Zilothians had ever processed. It was as though the warship had been designed for one thing only, to make any potential invaders think twice. "Captain," the same crew member spoke again, his voice now filled with confusion. "The energy levels, they're increasing." Zarvox turned sharply. "Increasing? What do you mean?" "The power source of the ship, it's becoming more active. The ship itself is responding, Captain. It's almost as if it knows we are here." The captain's eyes widened. The human warship wasn't just a machine, it was alive in a way. Every weapon, every shield, every system inside it seemed to be reacting to the Zilothians' presence in a way that was deeply unsettling. For a moment, Zarvox felt a strange, primal fear, something that he had never experienced in all his years of conquest. This was more than a battle of technology. It was a battle of wills. "Run another scan," Zarvox commanded, his voice tense. The crew scrambled to recheck the data. As the scan was redone, the results came back even more alarming. The warship wasn't just powerful, it was unpredictable. The human systems weren't organized in the way that most alien ships were. The usual patterns of order and control were missing. It was as though the humans had built their technology to adapt and evolve, making it difficult to predict their next move. Zarvox's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just a military vessel, it was a living organism, a force of nature. The way the human ship was designed, its every aspect seemed to scream survival, a willingness to overcome any challenge. The Zilothians realized that they hadn't just stumbled upon a weapon of war. They had encountered an enemy that had mastered the art of adaptation, a species that knew how to thrive in the harshest environments. "Captain, we've encountered something strange," another crew member spoke nervously. Zarvox turned to face him. "What is it?" "Parts of the ship. They're emitting a strange form of energy. It doesn't match any known signature. It's like the ship is evolving, adjusting to our presence." Zarvox stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it all. What kind of species would create something like this? Something so unpredictable, so adaptable? The Zilothians were used to having the upper hand, to controlling the situation. But this was different. The humans had designed their warship to outsmart anything that came near it, to learn from its surroundings and to evolve as needed. And now, Zarvox understood. The humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting to stay in control of their fate. They had learned to adapt to every challenge they faced, and in doing so, they had become something far more dangerous than any of the Xylothians had realized. He took a deep breath and turned back to his crew. Initiate a full scan of the surrounding area. I want to know everything about this ship and the humans who built it. They are unlike any species we've encountered before. There's something about them, something that makes them different from the rest of the galaxy's inhabitants. We need to understand what we're up against. The crew worked in silence, their eyes glued to the screens as the scans continued. Each new reading was more astonishing than the last. The human warship had been built for more than just war. It had been built with a kind of intelligence that seemed to rival the Xylothians themselves. It was as though the ship had a mind of its own, constantly adapting, constantly learning. Zarvox realized with a deep sense of unease that this battle was not going to be like any other they had fought. The humans weren't just survivors. They were builders, creators, thinkers. They weren't like the weak species the Xylothians had conquered in the past. No, these humans were something different, something terrifying. The captain's thoughts raced. Could they defeat the humans? Could they truly conquer a species so intelligent, so determined? As the scan continued, Zarvox's unease grew. He had to admit it. This warship, these humans, were not just a challenge, they were a warning. The galaxy was about to change, and the Xylothians might not be ready for what was coming. As the hours passed, the tension aboard the Xylothian ship grew unbearable. The scans had provided new data, but it only deepened the mystery surrounding the human warship. Zarvox stood in front of the main console, eyes locked on the glowing screen. His mind was a whirl of confusion and unease. This was no ordinary ship. It was something entirely different. The more they analyzed, the more it became clear. This human warship was not just a symbol of advanced technology. It was a symbol of something else entirely, something the Xylothians had not expected. The data showed that the ship was constructed with a mixture of technologies that had no clear origin. It wasn't just one type of engineering. It was a blend of many, each layer more complex than the last. And it was adaptable. The systems inside the ship weren't fixed. They were flexible, changing to meet whatever challenge was at hand. What kind of beings create such a thing? Zarvox muttered, under his breath. His voice, normally calm and authoritative, now carried a hint of uncertainty. The crew continued to examine the data, each new revelation more baffling than the last. The weapons on board were unlike anything the Xylothians had ever seen, but it wasn't the weapons that made them stop and think. It was the ship itself. It had a life of its own, reacting to its environment, adjusting in ways the Xylothians couldn't predict. One of the crew members stepped forward, his voice filled with awe. "Captain, I believe this ship was not just made for defense. It was made to overcome any threat. The way it evolves its systems based on external factors, it's beyond anything we've encountered." Zarvox nodded slowly, his mind racing. The human warship was alive in a way. It wasn't just a ship. It was a product of a species that had learned to adapt, to evolve with every challenge they faced. This wasn't a simple mechanical creation. It was a testament to the humans' ability to survive and thrive in an unforgiving universe. The humans, they don't just build technology. They build tools to learn and grow. They adapt to their environment and become stronger with each obstacle, Zarvox said, his voice quieter now, almost to himself. Another crew member spoke up, his voice tinged with fear. "Captain, there's something else we've discovered. It's not just the ship, the humans themselves. Their biology is unlike anything we've encountered. Their bodies, their minds, they're designed to endure. They can survive in the harshest environments. Even their mental capacity is far beyond most species. If we underestimate them, we will regret it." Zarvox felt a chill run down his spine. He had never felt so unsure of his mission. In all his years of leading the Zolothian fleet, he had never encountered an enemy quite like this. The humans weren't just strong physically, they were strong mentally too. They could withstand challenges, grow from them, and become more powerful as a result. "We have to consider all possibilities," Zarvox said, his tone serious. "If we engage with them, it won't be like any battle we've fought before. The humans may surprise us. They may not fight like the other species we've conquered. They are unpredictable, and that is what makes them dangerous." The crew nodded and a heavy silence filled the room. The reality of the situation began to settle in. The Zolothians had spent centuries conquering weaker species, wiping out any civilization that posed a threat. But here, in front of them, was something entirely different. The humans were not just a species, they were a challenge to everything. The Zolothians believed about their dominance in the galaxy. "Initiate a scan of their communication signals," Zarvox ordered, his voice now steady. "I want to understand their behavior better. We need to learn everything we can about how they think." As the crew began to work, the captain's thoughts turned inward. What if the Zolothians had made a mistake? What if this species was too powerful, too unpredictable, to conquer? Zarvox had always been confident in his people's ability to crush any opposition, but the humans were making him doubt everything he knew about warfare and strategy. The communication scans revealed more disturbing information. The humans didn't rely on traditional methods of communication. Their systems were designed to be decentralized, ensuring that if one part of their network was disabled, the rest could still function. They had built redundancy into every aspect of their technology. Even their communication was a form of survival. Zarvox's mind raced as he pieced together the full picture. The humans weren't just creating a warship, they were creating a way of life. Their entire civilization was built around the idea of overcoming adversity, of learning from failure, and becoming stronger each time they were challenged. This was not just a battle for territory, it was a battle for the future of the galaxy itself. "We've underestimated them," Zarvox said quietly, the weight of the realization settling heavily on his shoulders. "These humans, they will not be easy to defeat. We need to change our approach." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The captain's words hit them hard. They had always seen themselves as the ultimate conquerors, the strongest force in the universe. But now they were facing a species that was not only surviving, they were thriving. The humans were not just resisting, they were learning, growing, and adapting faster than any enemy they had ever faced. "Prepare for all outcomes," Zarvox ordered. "We cannot afford to make another mistake." As the crew scrambled to ready themselves for what was to come, Zarvox couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would change everything. The Zolothians were about to face a challenge that would push them to their limits, and in that moment Zarvox realized the truth. The future of the galaxy was no longer in their hands. It was in the hands of the humans. As the days passed, the Zolothians continued to study the human warship, trying to learn everything they could about its systems, its weapons, and its crew. But with each passing moment, the mystery only deepened. The more they learned, the more they realized that the humans were not only a threat, they were a puzzle, one that they could not easily solve. Captain Zarvox spent hours analyzing the data, his mind constantly turning over what he had learned so far. The humans were unlike any species he had ever encountered. They weren't just powerful, they were resilient in ways that defied logic. The ship they had built was a masterpiece of engineering, capable of adapting to any situation. But it wasn't just the ship that worried him. It was the people who had built it. The humans had created a society that valued endurance, intelligence, and adaptability above all else. And now, they had a weapon that reflected those same values. Zarvox couldn't help but feel a growing sense of admiration for the humans. They had created something that even the Zolothians had not been able to replicate, something that could evolve in real time, changing and adapting to meet new threats. This was a weapon that wasn't just designed to destroy, it was designed to survive. And that, above all else, made it a danger to everything the Zolothians held dear. But as much as Zarvox admired the humans, he knew that they were still the enemy. The Zilothians had come here to conquer, to claim another world as their own. And the humans, with their unpredictable nature and incredible resilience, were standing in their way. As the crew continued their work, they uncovered more information about the humans' past. It wasn't just their technology that was impressive, it was their history. The Zilothians learned that the humans had fought against impossible odds for centuries. They had endured wars, plagues, and natural disasters. They had faced challenges that would have destroyed any other species. And yet, they had always found a way to survive. Their history was one of struggle, of perseverance, and of unyielding determination. The more the Zilothians learned, the more they began to understand that the humans were not just a species to be defeated. They were a force of nature, something that could not be easily controlled or contained. The humans had learned to thrive in the most hostile environments, to adapt to the most extreme conditions. They were not like the other species the Zilothians had encountered, species that had been easy to crush underfoot. The humans, it seemed, were made of something different. "This isn't just about technology," one of Zarvox's officers said, quietly, breaking the silence that had settled over the command room. "It's about the humans themselves. They've built their entire way of life around surviving and thriving in the face of adversity." Zarvox nodded. "Yes, I've come to realize that as well. They are not just fighting to protect their world. They are fighting to protect everything they have worked for, everything they've built. We cannot underestimate them. They will not go down easily." The crew stood in silence, the weight of Zarvox's words sinking in. For the first time, they began to understand just how formidable their opponents were. The humans had built a society that was resilient, resourceful, and endlessly adaptive. They were not just defending their warship. They were defending everything that made them who they were. And the Zilothians had only just begun to scratch the surface of what they were up against. Zarvox's thoughts turned to the future. What would happen if the Zilothians attacked? They could destroy the human warship, but would that truly be the end? Or would it only provoke something worse? The humans had already shown that they could adapt to any threat. They might even learn from the battle itself, growing stronger with each encounter. For the first time in his life, Zarvox found himself questioning his own strategy. The Zilothians had always been conquerors, unstoppable and ruthless. But the humans were different. They weren't just fighters, they were survivors. And that made them dangerous in a way that the Zilothians hadn't fully understood until now. "We need to rethink our approach," Zarvox said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "If we attack them directly, we may only be fueling their determination to survive. We need to understand how they think, how they approach conflict. Only then will we have a chance of winning." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Zarvox was known for his unwavering confidence, his ability to lead with strength and decisiveness. But now they saw something else in him, a flicker of doubt, a sense of unease that had never been present before. "We've always relied on our strength, our superiority in technology and numbers," Zarvox continued. "But these humans, they are different. They don't fight like others. They fight to adapt, to grow stronger with every challenge. If we're going to defeat them, we need to change the way we approach this war." The room fell into a heavy silence as the crew absorbed the captain's words. It was clear now that the Zilothians could no longer rely on their usual tactics. They had underestimated the humans from the beginning, and now they were paying the price for their arrogance. The humans had something the Zilothians didn't, an unbreakable will to survive no matter the cost. Zarvox took a deep breath, his mind already working through new strategies, new ways to approach the coming conflict. But one thing was clear: the Zilothians were no longer the predators in this galaxy. They were the prey, and the humans were the ones who held the power to decide the fate of the galaxy. "The time has come to truly understand our enemy," Zarvox said, his voice firm once more. "We cannot afford to make any more mistakes. We must learn everything there is to know about the humans. Only then will we be ready for what lies ahead." And so, with the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders, Zarvox prepared for the next phase of their mission. The war was far from over, and it would be more difficult than any they had fought before. But Zarvox had a feeling that, in the end, it would be the humans who would decide the outcome. As the days passed, the tension aboard the Zolothian flagship only grew stronger. Zarvox stood at the head of the command center, deep in thought as his crew continued to work tirelessly, analyzing every new piece of data that came in. The humans, with their remarkable ability to adapt and evolve, had become an enigma. The more they learned, the less they understood. And yet, Zarvox knew one thing for certain: the humans were not to be underestimated. The captain had always prided himself on his ability to outthink his enemies. He had always been the one to anticipate their next move, to stay several steps ahead in any situation. But now, for the first time in his career, he felt as though he was playing catch-up. The humans were unpredictable, unlike any species the Zolothians had encountered before, and that made them dangerous. "Captain, we've finished another round of scans," one of the officers reported, his voice filled with uncertainty. "But the data, it's not making sense. The human warship is unlike anything we've studied before. It's not just its power or its systems, it's how it interacts with its surroundings." Zarvox's brow furrowed. "What do you mean by interacts?" The officer hesitated for a moment before continuing. "It's as though the ship is constantly changing. The structure, the layout, it's not static. It seems to shift, almost, like it's adjusting itself to the environment around it." Zarvox took a step closer to the officer's console, staring at the data that was flashing across the screen. What the officer said was true. The ship's systems appeared to be in a constant state of flux, almost as if it was evolving in response to the scans, learning from the process itself. "It's not just adapting," Zarvox muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "It's alive. The ship has a form of intelligence, one that's tied to its environment. Captain, we've also detected a series of encrypted signals coming from the warship," another officer added. "It's not like anything we've seen. It's not a traditional form of communication. The patterns are unlike anything in our archives." Zarvox turned sharply. "So, it's not just the ship that's adaptive. The humans are using a form of communication that evolves as well?" "Yes, Captain," the officer confirmed. "It's like they've built their entire infrastructure to evolve and adapt, to stay ahead of any threat. Whatever we throw at them, they'll learn from it, and they'll be ready the next time." A heavy silence settled over the command center. Zarvox's mind raced as he absorbed the full implications of what he was hearing. The humans had created a system that was constantly learning, constantly adapting. It was as if every part of their civilization had been designed to thrive under pressure, to survive in the most hostile of environments. "This is unlike anything we've encountered," Zarvox said finally, his voice low and thoughtful. "These humans, they don't just survive, they grow stronger the more they're challenged. We can't just attack them head on. We need to find a way to outsmart them, to understand how they think and act." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Zarvox had always been confident in his ability to lead, but this time there was something different in his tone. The humans had pushed the Zolothians into a corner. They had created a system that could not only survive an attack but learn from it, becoming more dangerous with each encounter. "We need to learn more about them," Zarvox continued, his voice resolute. "We cannot defeat them by force alone. We need to understand their culture, their way of thinking, their strategies. If we can learn how they think, we can predict their actions and find a way to outmaneuver them." The crew nodded in agreement, but the uncertainty in their eyes was clear. They were used to facing enemies who could be outpowered, outsmarted, or overwhelmed. But the humans were different. They were resourceful, clever, and adaptable. The more the Zolothians learned about them, the more they realized that brute force alone would not be enough to win this battle. Zarvox turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to the fleet. I want all ships to stand by. We are not going to make our move just yet. We need time to learn more about the humans before we do anything rash." The officer nodded and began transmitting the order. Zarvox paced, back and forth, deep in thought. The humans had already shown that they could adapt to any threat. What made them so unique was their ability to turn their weaknesses into strengths. They didn't rely solely on their physical power or technological superiority. They relied on their ability to learn, to grow, and to adapt to their circumstances. It was a form of intelligence that was almost organic in nature. As the hours passed, Zarvox became more and more absorbed in the task at hand. He reviewed the historical records the Zilothians had gathered about humanity, trying to piece together a picture of who they were and how they had survived for so long. What he found only deepened his respect for them. The humans had faced numerous challenges throughout their history, yet they had always found a way to rise above them. They had conquered diseases, natural disasters, and even their own internal conflicts. And each time, they had come out stronger. "Captain," one of the officers said, interrupting his thoughts, "we've received a new transmission from the human warship." Zarvox straightened, his curiosity piqued. "What does it say?" The officer looked up, a hint of apprehension in his eyes. "It's a challenge. They want us to engage them directly, but under their terms. They're offering us a form of negotiation, but it's clear they're not afraid of us." Zarvox's heart skipped a beat. The humans weren't cowering in fear. They were challenging the Zilothians, demanding that they face them on equal ground. It was a bold move, one that spoke to the humans' confidence in their own abilities. He stood silently for a moment, contemplating the offer. The humans were not afraid to face the Zilothians. They were not seeking to run or hide. Instead, they were offering a chance for both sides to engage in a contest of strength and strategy. It was a daring proposition, one that would test the very core of the Zilothian superiority. "They're not like any species we've ever encountered," Zarvox murmured to himself. "But we must be careful. If we take this challenge lightly, it may be our undoing." He turned to his crew. "Prepare for the next phase. The humans have made their move, and now it's time for us to respond. But remember, this is not just about winning. It's about understanding our opponents. If we don't learn from this encounter, we may never understand what we're truly up against." The crew nodded, a new sense of purpose filling the room. The humans had issued a challenge, and now the Zilothians had no choice but to accept. But Zarvox knew that this wouldn't be a typical battle. This would be a test of not just their strength but of their minds, and he had no idea what the outcome would be. As the days stretched on, the tension aboard the Zilothian flagship became almost unbearable. Zarvox paced restlessly, staring out into the vastness of space, contemplating the challenge that lay ahead. The humans had made it clear. They were not intimidated. They were not running, nor were they hiding. Instead, they were standing firm, demanding that the Zilothians meet them on equal terms, with no fear of the consequences. It was a strategy that was both bold and, in its own way, brilliant. But it left Zarvox with a sense of unease. He had faced many battles, many challenges, but none quite like this. He knew the time had come for action. The Zilothians had always prided themselves on their ability to adapt to any situation, but now they were facing an enemy who had already mastered that very skill. The humans had faced countless trials, and they had always found a way to survive. Their technology was not only advanced, it was alive in a way that the Zilothians could not fully comprehend. "Captain, the fleet is ready," said one of Zarvox's officers, interrupting his thoughts. "The warship is awaiting your command." Zarvox turned, meeting the officer's gaze with a firm nod. "Very well. Prepare the fleet for the next phase. We move forward, but we do so cautiously. The humans are not like the species we have conquered before. They are calculating and strategic. We need to understand their next move before we make ours." The officer hesitated, clearly unsettled. "But Captain, if we don't strike soon, we risk losing the initiative. The humans are bold, but they could be testing us, waiting to see how we react." Zarvox took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had always believed that decisive action was the key to victory. But this was different. The humans were unlike any enemy the Zilothians had faced. They had shown that they were capable of turning any disadvantage into an advantage, and Zarvox was not willing to make a move until he had a better understanding of their next steps. "No," Zarvox replied firmly. Patience. We cannot afford to be hasty. The humans may appear confident, but they are still learning about us, just as we are learning about them. They are not infallible. Let us take the time to analyze their next move carefully. We will not be the ones to rush into this fight. The room fell silent as the crew absorbed their captain's words. They had been trained to fight with strength and speed, to dominate their enemies with overwhelming force. But Zarvox was right. The humans were different. If they were to defeat this unique species, they would need to think and act differently as well. For the next several hours, Zarvox and his officers focused on gathering more intelligence about the humans. The Zilothians had been able to decipher some of their communication patterns, but there was still much they didn't know. The human warship, for all its complexity, seemed to be a reflection of the humans themselves, constantly changing, adapting, and evolving to face whatever challenges came their way. As Zarvox sat before the main console, reviewing the data once more, a sudden realization struck him. The humans weren't just reacting to the Zilothians' moves, they were anticipating them. It was as if they were always one step ahead, preparing for any possible outcome. Their systems were designed to withstand even the most unpredictable scenarios, and they were learning how to think in ways that made them a formidable foe. Captain, one of the officers spoke up again, breaking Zarvox's concentration. We've found something interesting. The humans have begun sending out small probes, nothing large but enough to gather information. They're studying us as much as we are studying them. Zarvox's eyes narrowed. So they are preparing for a direct confrontation after all. They want to see how we react before they make their next move. The officer nodded. It seems that they're testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses, trying to learn as much as they can before committing to anything. Zarvox leaned back in his chair, his mind whirling. This was not what he had expected. The humans weren't merely waiting for an opportunity to strike. They were preparing for a prolonged engagement, one that would test not just their strength but their intelligence and their ability to adapt. They were setting the stage for a battle of wits as much as a battle of firepower. They are truly remarkable, Zarvox murmured to himself. I had no idea how deep their strategies ran. They understand warfare in a way that no other species we've encountered does. The officer looked at him curiously. What do you suggest, Captain? Should we begin preparing for a full-scale engagement? Zarvox stood, his expression thoughtful. Not yet. We need to understand more about these probes. We need to know exactly what they're looking for and what they hope to learn. If we can predict their next move, we'll be in a better position to act. For the next few days, Zarvox and his crew worked tirelessly, intercepting and analyzing the human probes. They were small, seemingly insignificant, but each one provided more information about the humans' intentions. Slowly, the Zilothians began to piece together a clearer picture of their enemy's strategy. The humans weren't just looking for weaknesses, they were trying to understand the Zilothians' thought process, their tactics, and their weaknesses in the most subtle ways possible. It became increasingly clear that the humans were not relying on brute force or sheer numbers to win. They were relying on their ability to outthink and outmaneuver their opponents, just as they had done throughout their history. The human strength lay not in their technology, but in their capacity to adapt and evolve. We've been too focused on their ship, Zarvox said one day, as he reviewed the latest findings. The true threat is not the warship itself, but the humans' ability to think and react. They are not like other species. They are not bound by tradition or rigid strategies. They have the flexibility to shift gears at any moment. This will not be an easy victory. He paused, turning to his crew with a renewed sense of determination. We will learn from them, adapt to their tactics, and use that knowledge to our advantage. The key to defeating the humans is not brute strength, it's understanding them. We need to predict their moves, not just react to them. Once we understand how they think, we will be ready to make our move. The crew nodded in agreement, their resolve strengthening. Zarvox knew that this would be no ordinary conflict. This would be a battle of minds as much as it would be a battle of strength. And he also knew that, for the first time, the Zolothians were not the ones with the upper hand. The humans had taken that position, and it was up to Zarvox and his crew to learn from them, adapt, and find a way to turn the tide. The war was far from over, and Zarvox understood now that the humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to evolve, to grow stronger with every challenge they faced, and that made them more dangerous than anything he had ever encountered.